I was talking to Hsing-ay about it, and she said, you know, it's very conversational the way it occurs. The conversation starts out kind of normally. There's a 4-bar phrase, which I'm going to orchestrate in flute on the soprano in light strings behind. There's a reply in woodwind, the next 4-bar phrase with oboe at the top and prominent bassoon. And after 2 bars, it switches to clarinet at the mezzo forte. And then the conversation changes and it becomes a little bit tension-filled, more of a murmuring in what is essentially a string quartet. And then the next reply is sort of brash, which I do in brass with trumpets in the first 2 measures. But then the brashness kind of goes away with some, I don't know, self-awareness that wasn't quite appropriate. And it melts into the last 2 bars are a brass chorale with a French horn and trombone. Then there's a woodwind section, the next 4-bar phrase, which is kind of searching. And then really a 4-bar phrase full of pathos, which I've scored in voice in the soprano and strings below. Then the opening phrase returns, and here I like to voice it with 2 flutes, the soprano voice in each hand. Then there's an interlude that I'm scoring for harp. And the ending of the piece is back in strings, with the low bass notes toward the end scored as a double bass and timpani. Then the final 2 notes are scored with celesta. So basically it's a conversation that gets going, it becomes complicated by all sorts of things, and at the end some sort of mutual understanding is arrived at, or rapprochement, or maybe some kind of conclusion. Flute seems to have, is really kind of a smooth sound. Oboe is a little bit more narrow and out. Bassoon is it's kind of rounder. It's, I don't know, it depends on your register, I think. But.
I think that's lovely. I think of the woodwind sound as just having more of a container. Mm-hmm. And I think you're giving me that. I feel that. I think the only difference that I might try is to have the connection between the notes be a little tighter.
Yeah, especially with like clarinet or, but then, or flute, which would really be different,
Did you guys see how much Michael's wrist was involved that time? That was a lot of freedom that your wrist had. Now, it's not about how much you're moving, but it's just that you weren't holding anything in there. You're letting the air go through like a woodwind instrument.
It's kind of liquidy, somewhere between a liquid and a gas.
Yeah, that's great. The tricky thing about the woodwind idea is that it should be really connected, but it can't have any overlap. There's no overlap at all. Sometimes I think I felt like your left hand had a little stickiness. And so as a woodwind, you want to release like right on time.
I liked it. What do you mean about no overlap?
So this is an overlap.
Right.
Yeah. So when you're trying to be more liquid or fudgy or something like that, you actually want an overlap of your fingers. But when you want woodwind, you're trying to be very contained and specific.
So the whole orchestration project has been so much fun, in part because you get to actually orchestrate something, in your mind at least. And that was great fun, something I've never even thought about. But the other part that was very fun was to listen to other people and to you and how they execute the sound that in some imaginable way is the sound of that instrument you would like to have. playing, and then to work it out for yourself of what makes that sound and how do you execute that. But in this particular piece, which was the last Nocturne of Poulenc, uh, it started off, I was kind of interested in the piece and in the way it was broken up into phrases and conversations, and then later I thought about the orchestration, but at the very end I really wasn't thinking about the orchestration at all. I was thinking about the piece, and that somehow those two things had just sort of synthesized, and it was back to what's the character of the piece and what am I trying to convey, and the joy of all that,
You completed the circle
Yeah.
because I feel like the important part about each journey is the coming home afterwards.
I think of it more as a helix rather than a circle. So you're not coming back to the same spot. You're coming back to the same spot, but spatially removed from where you started. So that things get, deeper, farther, something like that, every time you go through that cycle. And I guess we all do that with things we're working on anyway, because there's a million considerations, and you end up getting into those and coming back to the whole and feeling differently about everything.
Right. For me to make the space for the subconscious to come in, I have to be really conscious and commit to decisions. So like when you actually picked out very specifically which instrument for which phrases, it just made you take a creative risk that is further out there in the outfield rather than what's convenient and what's close up. Like for you to actually be trying to think out there like an oboe rather than a pianist. And I think that's what was really exciting. And I really heard the differences between your phrases.
Mhm.
That was really amazing.
Because I'm always uncertain that whether anything comes across, And so that was part of the fun of the class, was that things did come across, even on Zoom they came across. And so
Yeah.
it's affirming that you're doing something in the right direction.
Yeah, it's all a big experiment. You never know if it's going to work until you do it.
Ordinarily, I don't entirely, because it isn't my style particularly to plan things out very exactly and then to riff on it when you finally get to performance. Usually I'm just more intuitive about it, and I plan things a lot more than I used to, but not as clearly as I have on a couple of things I've worked on with you, and this is one of them, because in getting the orchestration right, you really have to have the sound, the dynamic, the rhythm that goes with that instrument also. And so I really did have to think precisely about each note and each phrase and each connection.
So that you can forget about it.
So that you can forget about it. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, bravo. It was so great. Let's pretend for a second that we're just feeling the air. Just like put your hands out and make sure there's no blockage anywhere in your body. Like you're not trying to be tight or sit in a certain posture. And then just feel the air. And can you become one with the air? Like, can you actually feel the air that's inside you? And then can you just become a gas? So there's no boundaries with your body, right? So when you play something really light, can you become like air? Something really light, like maybe, a string background shimmer. Okay, now let's try being something more liquid and thinking about being strings. Can you feel like you're swimming, like you're in a pool or something, and you have gills so you don't have to hold your breath, but can you feel the water around you? Can you feel it in your arms and shoulders so that there's no blockage anywhere? And then can you actually bring that to the scale and play it in a way that your body is part of this water that's all around you? And imagine that you're playing a scale in the way that it is spreading out. We talk about like playing how the string, the bowing, it can like spread itself into the string. Okay, and then let's think about being solid, like something with a brass instrument where you have to really have enough air to funnel through, there's a quantity there, there's a mass, right? So imagine that you are solid, you are made of like gold, you're a gold statue. What would that be like to be so solid and dense? And when you play, can you play it in a way that your whole body just feels like it's taking up that space? It's completely present and it's full. Even if you're playing piano, there's this full gush of air and molecules. It's just all there in a more dense fashion. Are you guys feeling your hands and your arms and your body respond when I'm giving you this imagery? Do you feel like you can metamorphosize into a different instrument?
So maybe I should try to be brass, something more solid.
Solid, so blocks of sound. That was fantastic.
But I'm also trying to conceptualize, okay, I played a little louder. I probably didn't connect the notes physically. So I'm trying to analyze how I'm actually touching the keys and creating that, as opposed to if I'm thinking of another sound. And maybe I just need to let that go and just hear it and be it. And it just happens. I don't know. I mean, that was kind of where my question was.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because mind-body connection is like on one side, one hand, we're trying to be super conscious of like doing something or seeing something. And then on the other hand, we're trying to create space for the subconscious to take over. So that's where the listening comes in, is the listening is a way of creating space for the other dimensions of ourselves other than the conscious part. And you need both. So you're kind of riding two trains. You're like, you know those movies where somebody is straddling two trains? That's kind of what performing is like you're trying to be super conscious and then you're trying to create space.
For sound colors, I definitely want most of the melodies to be with woodwinds. And so I started off choosing an oboe type sound since, I think of a shepherd maybe with some kind of reed instrument so that the oboe could do that.
At the beginning, I have strings and then trumpet for this sort of fanfare in the third movement for that first phrase, and then the second phrase really switches more to flute and violin and bassoon and the bass.
Yay! The performances today, really, I felt like you guys upped it another notch. Like the rubato, the sense of rubato and like melting. So many moments where I was just really impressed at where you guys were coming from and how much risk you were taking. And then the other part of it is just the real difference when you guys say that this phrase is this instrument and this phrase is this instrument. And I really heard a difference. I mean, that was just incredible. So you guys are so musical, and there's so much creativity in each of your playing, and I can't wait to hear more of it.
I was amazed at how different the colors came across in everybody's playing. And in the different hypermeasures and everything. It was beautiful. And then for me personally, something I really appreciated and I learned from this was the idea of layering. And I paid so much more attention to inner voices than I ever have before. And so I really appreciated that.
It was really clear in your playing too.
Oh yeah.
And I thought everybody else was fabulous. I just really enjoyed it. It was fun to see their ideas play out. I never think like this, so this is not me.